Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Book Review. We're excited tonight. We have 3 reviewers, our ever reliable, dependable, and consistent reviewer-in-chief. Ezinne Obiora is on ground as always. Ezinne Obiora is the Chief Human Resource and Operation Officer for FEMO Visions. Also tonight, we have the privilege and pleasure of having an outstanding male reviewer in the person of Moses Obleba. Moses is an HR and operations analyst with Axon Analytics Limited. Is in charge of HR and operations in that great organization. Last but not the least, tonight, we also have as a co-discussant on this special edition of our book review, Ololade Apalowo, emphasis on my body language right now. She is an HR consultant, and she, alongside Moses and Ezinne, will be sharing their thoughts around this book. Again, tonight, the book we are reviewing, the book we have reviewed throughout this month is Managing People, co-authored by Philip L. Onsaka and Joanna Onsaka. Please don't ask me if they're a couple or they are siblings, but they are good and great co-authors. I'm sure they are co-authors. Their relationship, I cannot define. Ladies and gentlemen, while the session is ongoing, please let's follow along. Let's share our thoughts at the end. We are also encouraged to share our thoughts. You don't have to agree. You can disagree. You can also put in context your experience with respect to the thoughts of both our reviewers and the thoughts of the co-authors. I think I'd like to hand over to Ezinne. I take a bow.
Thank you very much, Yemi. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another book review for the month of July. So this book, we were talking about it earlier. It was a particularly engaging book, very pleasurable to read. And there was a lot of engagement, even in the group, around it. But yeah, we're here today to review, and like Yemi has introduced, I have 2 wonderful co-facilitators with me. This month is going to be a bit different. I'm going to take the back seat and, have them take the spotlight. I mean, I'll pop in my head at the end, but yeah, I'm going to hand over to my wonderful co-facilitators for today to take us through this book review. And how it's going to work is, they will take 2 chapters each, and then at the end, I'll come in to give highlights, particular things that stood out, things that stood out particularly for me. And then we'll also see if we can create room for questions, contributions, if time permits us. So yes, without much ado, I'd like us to start off with our first facilitator, my first facilitator for the day. That's the person of Lolade. Lolade is going to kick this off, ladies first. So Lolade will take us through the first 2 chapters, and then once she's done with that, Moses will come in with the next 2 chapters. Lolade, over to you. Thank you very much for taking up the opportunity to do this.
Well, I'll say thank you to everyone. Thank you very much, Z, for the push, and thanks to everyone. Sorry, my voice is a bit bad, but it's still going to be fun. We're going to have fun, and I hope I'm really, really communicating. Well, the book for the month, like we earlier mentioned, is Managing People, and it's a very interesting read, and I challenge myself, so I'm happy I'm doing this. So talking about the first 2 chapters, I'm talking about managing people. The first chapter was talking about before you learn to manage, or before you can manage people, the important thing is understanding who you are, understanding yourself, basically. So for you to be able to manage others, you must be able to know who you are. And the book, about 5 or 6 topics was actually highlighted in this, which is 1, developing self-awareness. So that means for you to be able to understand yourself, you're able to develop who you are, understand yourself, develop self-awareness, understand how well in terms of emotional intelligence and how assertive you are, right? Also, it talks about, setting clear values, right? So going straight into it, you're wondering, why do I need to understand myself before I can manage people? The truth is, you need to understand yourself, because when you understand yourself, you know your personality, you know who you really are, right? You understand, your values, you understand your strength, as it were. Talking about, I when I was reading, I thought, oh, like you need to know what your SWOT is. What are your weaknesses, your strength, your opportunity, because this also helps you, in terms of knowing how to manage the people on your team, also in terms of building team, knowing who to surround yourself with, right? So in understanding ourselves as managers, it's a very important criteria before we can, want to lead, right? And when you look through the chapter, yeah, there are a lot of emphasis on self-awareness, right? And when you talk about self-awareness, is it just beyond knowing your temperament or what? It's about knowing your temperament. What are your values? Because when you know your temperament, you know where you are, where you're going. It helps you to be able to create a value for yourself. It helps you to create a vision for yourself, right? So even when you have a team, you can be able to guide them right. It helps you understand your management style. Because some people are kind of temperamental. They know, because I'm temperamental, right? I need some my team not as temperamental as I am, right? And the book talks about the Y and the X. Hello? Sorry, am I communicating? Because from my end, it's showing still. Okay.
Go ahead, Lola.
All right then. Okay. So like I mentioned, you need to really understand yourself. When you understand yourself, you know who you are. Lolade, knowing who I am, understanding my values, understanding my vision, my purpose, my mission, then I can now say, okay, now I understand myself. Then the next thing is, okay, now that I understand myself, I understand my purpose, right? Then I can put one or other things together, and then I begin to manage the team, right? Knowing yourself will help you manage people better. Because if you don't know yourself, we really can manage people. Because when you don't even know who you are, other people will be the ones telling you who you are. Some people say, yes, I know myself. I know I'm very temperamental. So that's why I decided not to talk. But that's why I decided to have this person on the team, right? That's why in forming a team, it's a makeup of different individuals. But when you do not know who you are, how do you want to form a team? How do you want to even know how to direct people? How do you cannot lead when you don't even know your purpose. Beyond the purpose of the organization, like I tell people that for me, in every organization, in HR, actually I like to align. HR, I want to align the people, right, to the organizational goals. But beyond aligning the people to the organization goals, the organization goals actually has to align with the people goals. So in knowing who we are, in knowing our beliefs, in knowing our values, in understanding our vision, knowing our personality really helps. Then can now say, oh, that's something. Oh, I have this kind of military thingy, autocratic. Then I just can't help myself. So you can now have somebody that is a bit diplomatic on your team. That helps you cool the effects. In any team in leading, right? Just as I would say in like a union, You know, we need different people for, we need people with different futures, with people with different temperament. When somebody's, you know, a bit on the tough side, the other person is cool. But when you don't know yourself, this could actually help. This might not help you in being an effective leader. So what beyond that, you know, beyond knowing ourselves, you know, then also you now understand, okay, this is my level of, this is where, because I know myself, then I know how well I understand things. You know, the book also talks about emotional intelligence, talks about intelligence, your IQ, right? To be a successful manager, we need to have, there's a level of emotional intelligence, there's a level of the actual intelligence we need. But, you know, beyond that, there's also a level of social intelligence. So when you know how to, when you have this level, you know, the emotional, the political, how political intelligence are you? How emotional intelligent are you? Leader or as a future leader. This will help you, you know, in knowing, okay, I'm here, I'm 20, I'm here, I'm 10, you know, in the composition of your people and in helping you to direct and manage your people. The book also talks about the 4 emotional intelligent components, which is self-awareness, self-management, relationship management, and social awareness. Because the truth is that as a leader, you need to be socially aware. As a leader, you need to be able to manage yourself. Applying assertiveness. You know, some of us as leaders, we are not assertive. So when you're being assertive, that doesn't mean that you're, you know, at times when you talk about being assertive, some people take it as, oh, is it pride or you're being arrogant? No. Being is to say that you know what is right and you're putting it right. You're letting people know this is the way, this is how it ought to be done, and this is how we're going to get it done, right? Being assertive just means you're holding you're being firm on something. So as a leader, how assertive are you? Or how assertive are you? So when you know yourself, you know that, okay, I might be like, maybe I'm very emotional. Because you now know that you're a very emotional person, but there's some issues. For example, there's a case in the office where maybe somebody committed fraud and the guy is coming like, oh, the reason why I committed this fraud is because I had money. This is something very emotional, knowing that, oh, my boss is an emotional person, he or she understands me. But the truth is, what you did was wrong. Yes, I understand that the reason why you did this was because you had an issue and you felt that was the best way. But is it the right thing to do? So you need to be assertive. And in being assertive, it also, as a leader, is, you state the case. This is what you've done. It's not right, irrespective of the fact that why you did it, maybe to you felt it was right. And as leaders, we need to be very prepared. Are we prepared? Like the Boy Scouts or the Scouts motto said, be prepared. How prepared are we as leaders? Are we prepared for the now, the future? Are we prepared to handle all sort of things, right, within our organization? Then also, another thing about what I learned in chapter 1 is, in understanding yourself is you must also be able to, be able to analyze things. And when you're analyzing it, be practical, be real, and be very factual in it. So this also helps us as leaders. And in understanding yourself, I've also mentioned about clarifying your values. Because as a leader, if you really do not know your values, you might actually be easily swayed off. Your people can easily, take you off the track, right? So you must really, for a manager, for a leader, proposed leader, leader in progress, you must be able to know your values, stand by your values. Stand by your values. Because your boss is telling you to do, okay, I'm going to say something now. Okay, I remember I had an issue to do something which is, for me, it doesn't work for my values, and professionally, it doesn't work. And because he wanted me to do it, I had to take a decision. Of course, somebody else have told me that the decision I took was stupid, right? But no, I had to take a decision because you were telling me to do something that was against the ethics of my profession, that was against the ethics of my in terms of my person. So I had to take a walk. Was I stupid? Maybe, but the truth is I stood for my values. So what are your values as an individual? When we are talking about values, it has a lot to do with your professionalism, integrity, excellence. So in understanding yourself, excellence, integrity is required, professionalism. Are these values in line with your profession? In terms of ethics of the professionals as HR. There are a lot of things we do as HR that when we really sit back, sometimes bosses just come to you, fire this person, and you just do it because you're told to fire without understanding why. Does it actually work with your value? Does it work with the value of your profession? As HR managers, as HR leaders, you need to have a personal statement. When you have a personal statement, it helps you really because it's your mantra. And when you have a mantra, it helps you know that, okay, come what may, I'm going to do things by the books. Come what may, I'm going to do it right. But when you talk of doing things by the books, right, that doesn't mean that, there are times that it's not everything by the books, as it were. You put the human feeling to it. So what are your values? Are your values, are your goals, are your vision, is it in line with your business values? Is it in line with your team values? Is it in time with people values? So these are things we need to, put in mind here. And that's what the book is just telling us. Chapter 1 is like, you need to understand yourself. Understand yourself. Who are you? Know yourself, who you are, right? Understand in terms of how emotional intelligent are you, are socially intelligent, how politically intelligent are you? Because this also helps, especially in our workplace today. Because how well can you play the office politics? I used to tell people before now that I can't play office politics, but I've gotten to realize that you need to be able to play a particular amount, to a certain degree, understand and play the politics, the office politics. Of course, it's not like I'm leaking assets or trying to pull people down to climb it, but just also helps you to grow. Then also, how intelligent, how well do you know your responsibilities? How well do you know, how competent are you? Because when you know your strength, you know your weakness, the opportunities aligned to you, it helps you as a leader. It helps you as an individual, in managing people. So I'll just go straight to chapter 2. And for chapter 2, was talking about interacting with others. Of course, when I understand myself, I know who you are, who I am. I understand, oh, this is the makeup of Lolade. This is who Lolade, this is Lolade's personality, right? This is the kind of leadership skill I have. Because for some of us, we have more than one leadership skill, but you know your strength, your weaknesses, right? You understand yourself. It's not that people telling you, oh, Lola, this is who Lola is. You know this is who you are, right? Then the next thing is, okay, how then do I want to interact with people? So the book is telling us, after understanding yourself, interacting with others. Of course, in interacting with others, it talks about the communication. Of course, it talks about communication, and it broke it down to sending messages, listening, negotiations, as well as managing conflicts, right? As well as creating a kind of inclusion and within, while relating with others. When, the book was, it really, when I read it, I actually I smiled a lot because it was so practical. Most of us as leaders, we don't really have good communication ethics. And when I talk about communication, it's not really the speaking the grammar. What is communication, really? Communication is, of course, is the process of sending a message to people, to somebody else, and the person receiving the message and understanding the intent of the message. So communication is actually not completed if you do not understand, or if the receiver does not understand what you mean. Taking it back to the workplace, you tell your team members, okay, guys, we're going to be having a strategy session. I want you to do this, that. And, a lot of, maybe you're speaking a lot of grammar and they don't really understand it, or they don't have an idea into what you want. They don't have, they don't have insight into the bigger picture. They're going to take the message and run with it the wrong way. When you're talking of communication, when you're interacting with people as a leader, it's like the Chinese whisper. When you say something to the first person, take it down the line. There are different interpretations to it. So in wanting to become an effective manager, a good manager, right, we should be able to communicate well with the team. Whether when you're talking of communication, it could be verbal, could be written. How well do we communicate? Some of us have people, we have semi-skilled people within the team, the blue collars. I am speaking English. Come down to their, come back to use the layman English. I remember the first time I had to work with the callers. I will speak Yoruba, I will speak Pidgin. All I needed was just get what I wanted to say. And I asked again, do you understand? Okay, can you just, give me an insight into what I say? A lot of them will tell me, I'm like, no, this is it. Until I'm sure that they are fine, then they go with it. But when we just go out there, you just put out the big grammar, or you just send an email, you feel, oh, that is it. So of course, when you understand yourself, you will now know, okay, if I'm this kind of person that this is, I speak the grammar as much as possible, know the kind of people you're relating with, know your team, understand your workforce. When you understand them, then communicate with each team or each group based on the class of the people you're dealing with. It helps a lot. When you're sending message also, how do you send your messages? Is this something that is easily read? Is this something that wherever you send it, the people, the team can easily decode? Communication is not effective, I'm saying again, until, the receiver understands the intent of it, right? And you get a feedback. So in interacting with people, you need to communicate effectively, right? Of course, like I said, communication has to do with whether verbal or non-verbal, written and all that. So if it's through emails, how we send the email at the right time? Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it simple? When something is simple, it's very clear. people can easily, that a layman will understand. There are times that a lot of things going on in your head is different from how you should put it together. So we should actually, as leaders, take a step back when we want to say things, ensure that, especially when it's written, try to ensure that we go over it, that it's actually sending the message, so we don't send the wrong message. There are times that, one thing I've learned of late is I start using Grammarly, and Grammarly will tell you that when you're sending message, it tell you, oh, this is clear, it's friendly. There are a lot of classifications. Grammarly will tell you your message is, so the same way we should read the tone of our message, the content of our message goes a long way as managers. So when we're sending this, so we should also know that communication, like I said, could be written, if it's spoken, right? We should be very careful in saying it. Yes, you are trying to be assertive. We talked about being assertive. I'm trying to be assertive, but also do not, in being assertive, do not bring people down. Do not bring people down, right? So we should take note of that as leaders. So you don't talk down on people in trying to communicate or trying to be assertive, right? Then also, communication is not complete if you do not listen. Some of us are just talkers. We need to be able to listen. Take it back at times. Take a pause, listen. So as HR managers, how do we listen? This is when we do a pause check, because that's an opportunity for you at times to listen. This is when we do maybe the Thank God It's Friday. We do the interactive sessions, either through surveys or we do our town hall. So as HR, that's how we listen back. And that's how at times, some things you might have written in an email that somebody else might have taken, that's an opportunity for you to also, communicate to people what your intentions, what the values are. So, listening is very important, like I mentioned. Of course, the book talks about a lot of things we don't have to do as, in the do's and don'ts of listening, right? It talks about we should keep an open mind. So sometimes, some bosses, the moment you just want to say anything, they just block out. And it doesn't help your team to grow. The truth is, when you listen as an individual, when you listen as the manager, I tell you, you go a long way. Because it helps you understand people. It helps you even see things ahead of time. So the book talks about listening as a very important virtue that a manager needs to have. Then also in communication, there are some things we do. Some of us, okay, I'm going to say this. I remember when my first job, I had an issue. I had a manager. I never knew it was my manager, but the person said I looked at her like a cockroach. And I was wondering, what the hell, cockroach? How did I look at you? I don't even know you. Apparently, she happened to be one of the directors in my organization, and I never knew her, And I was wondering, look, I didn't even look at you. I didn't even notice I looked at her. Yes, it was an issue for me, but the learning over time was really, maybe I actually looked at her somehow and she took it the other way around. So also as managers, how do we look at our people? There are times we look down people. There's a way we give, there's a look we give, right? Or there's their gesticulations, their expressions we give, that shows whether respect, we don't value people, right? So these are also signs. So as manager, we should be very sensitive in noticing, the body movement of people, the non-audible communication of people, right? So, okay, that's it. Z. So basically, it's important for us to understand yourself, know how to interact with people. And of course, communication is very, very key. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lalade. Thank you for taking us through the first two chapters. Yeah, I mean, especially the second chapter, I like how you related it, you brought it down to, real life situations. That's the beautiful thing about this book. It's so relatable. But I took note of certain things that you said, and at the end, I'll come back to a few things that I took note of. But thank you so much. So without wasting time, we'll move on to Moses to take us through chapter 3 and chapter 4. You're muted, Moses. You're muted.
All right. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, can hear you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Special thanks to Ezinne and Dr. Oluyemi and the entire team. It's an absolute privilege to be hosting this session. And to be honest, I was enjoying Lolade's storified way of passing across this review. It almost felt like I should listen all through to the end, but I'm here to facilitate chapters 3 and 4, which basically focuses on managing a team, right? And also leading others. So, as we all know, teams are, like the foundation or the bedrock, or should we say like the center board of any organization. And it's important for managers to be able to understand, to build strong team, to be able to plan, delegate effectively, monitor to ensure that, tasks are not deviating from the original objectives, and also setting corrective measures, and also motivating. And also, it also involves leading others where, managers can provide direction, can influence employees, can galvanize people, and also obtaining their commitment, which is a very key thing here in order to achieve, the shared organizational goal. So it's important for managers to be able to lead the team, set an ethical pathway or ethical boundaries, that would govern the way they work, right? It should be able to also develop a power base to be able to ensure change management, positive change, and also improve through coaching, mentorship, and also manage the workforce, their careers, right? So we look at, the first one under managing people, which is setting plans and goals. And as we all know, planning basically involves setting objectives, and determining, various courses of actions in order to get those objectives. So it's important for managers to have, first of all, a good understanding of the organization's objectives, what are the strategies for achieving those goals? What are the manpower available? How do we develop this team and integrate them in order for us to have success? So the first key thing is knowing your goals in the organization. And in order to do this, you must be able to identify what are we trying to achieve? What is the strategy for us to get, these goals? Because these goals, are the foundation for the organization and even the planning activities. And, it's imperative for us to be able to develop and implement a plan. First of all, you need to define your overall goals, right? By asking yourself questions. Why do we exist, right? What do we do? And how do we do what we do? When you ask these questions, you begin to have a direction. You begin to know why the business exists, right? And then also you need to thoroughly analyze your working environment, where you do your SWOT analysis, you do your environmental scanning to say, okay, what can we achieve? What opportunities lie in this environment that we are in? What are the threats that we may encounter along the way? And then after that, you now use the result to set objectives, right, that you want to meet. And this will now create a standard that you measure your progress against, right? So, and after that, you need to formulate a plan. What are these objectives? What needs to be done? Which set of employees are going to carry out this task? What is the deadline? When is it going to happen? And then you implement the plan, right? After putting all these things in place, you've clarified roles, you're providing support as managers, and then lastly, you need to monitor progress, which is basically like a control system, right? To ensure that you are moving on the right path and the tasks that you set are not deviating from the original plan. And it's also important for us to set SMART goals, right? Which are specific, measurable, aligned, reachable, and most importantly, time-bound, right? So we'll now look at designing work. Job design basically refers to, the tasks that are combined to form a complete job. Now, it basically means getting the right job, to conform to the right people, taking into account the organizational goals, and also employee satisfaction. And as we all know, based on the book, the research carried out, it shows that well-designed jobs leads to high motivation, right? High quality performance from employees, which in turn leads to high satisfaction, low absenteeism rates, and turnover, right? And jobs may vary considerably, because a construction engineer's job is definitely different from an accountant's job, but they're all still regarded as jobs, right? So, but to be able to define jobs, we have 5 dimensions, be it a laborer, be it an accountant, a HR person, a construction worker. We should always be able to define jobs in 4 ways, right? Which are the skill variety, task identity, significance, autonomy, and feedback. For skill variety, it basically talks about, the degree to which a job requires a variety of activities, right? So that a worker can employ a number of different skills and talents. Let's take, for example, how we go about our daily activities as human resource managers. The competence level that we need to have and the amount of soft skills are put in place on a daily basis. Numeracy skills, analytics, strategy, communication, all of these things every day, unconsciously, we're putting it at play to achieve, the overall goal or even a task in the organization. And then we'll move on to task identity. This is basically the degree to which a job requires completion of a whole, an identifiable piece of work. Now, for example, let's say you're given a big task to do. You find out that sometimes you break this task into, let's say, checklists, right? And then as you're taking it one after the other, before you know, it is now complete, right? We'll move on to task significance. This is the degree to which, your job has an impact on the lives of other people. You see how in organizations, tasks are interdependent, what you're doing, the finance team needs to vet, R&D needs to come up with this strategy, there's compliance. So basically it talks about how each tasks are significant. And what comes to mind is like a system and system theory. How subsystems are working together in order to achieve that overall system goal. So that's like a very good example for task significance, right? So the next one is autonomy. So this is basically the degree to which you have discretion to go about your work. There's no one best way, to achieve task and responsibility. And it's important for us as workers, as employees or employers, to be able to have a level of autonomy in order to achieve certain tasks. Feedback, last but not the least, is very important, because it's important for people to get clear and direct information about the effectiveness of their performance. Okay, what did they do right? What did they do wrong? How can they improve? Would they be coaching sessions for this employee to grow? So it's important that you have feedback that would, inform how you approach work, and there are various ways to design work, that will make it successful. The first is to be able to combine tasks, Secondly, how do you expand jobs vertically? You know, how do you establish client relations? How do you improve, you know, feedback channels? You know, and this takes me to building high performance team. And I want to take a quote from this book, you know, one of the former CEO of Chrysler Corporation, Leah Lacoca, who stated that all business operations can be reduced to 3 words: people, product, and profit. You know, and if we notice, people came first, because unless you have a good team, you can't do much more with the other 2. And we all know that, you know, I stand to be corrected, that the most dynamic, the most important assets in the organization, you know, are its people. You can't do much more with the other 2 people, with the other 2 continuums, if you do not have, you know, a strong, high-performing team. And successful managers are those who create, work with, and manage successful teams. You know, and the team is basically a group of 2 or more people, you know, whether they are physical or remote, who see themselves as a distinguished unit from others. You know, they have complementary skills that balances each other, and they are committed to a purpose. You know, they have high performance goals, and they hold themselves mutually accountable. Right? And also, research and practical experience has shown that teams with more than 12 members tend to lack cohesion and struggle to make fast and effective decisions. You know, and for us to be able to understand team performance, we need to ask ourselves this question: who are we? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? You know, what are our work preferences? You know, what are our values? What are our common beliefs? What do we stand for? You know, that's a launch pad, you know, for understanding team performance, you know. And then where are we now, right? What's the current position that we are in? You know, how can we improve our weaknesses? You know, how can we identify opportunities, you know, that are lies in our environment, you know? And then where are we headed? You know, where are we going to? What's the vision? You know, what's the ethos? What's our mission? What's our purpose? You know, what are those specific team goals that, you know, we want to achieve, you know? So all of these things would help us understand team performance. And also, you know, how are we going to get there? You know, how do we intend to combine all of these things together? You know, what's our job description? You know, do we have a communication charter? You know, do we have a RACI chart? Do we have an accountability system? Do we have areas of authority? You know, all those things we put in place that would galvanize us to achieve results. And then what support do we need? You know, do people need to be trained? You know, do they need counseling? Do they need coaching? Do they need mentoring? You know, how do we strengthen that team and then, you know, achieve success? And then how effective are we? So this is basically just talking about, you know, those quality control measures that you put in place to ensure that, you know, the team is performing at a high level, right? And then this also brings me to the next section, which talks about delegating effectively. You know how it is for us as managers where we struggle to delegate tasks. And in some cases, when we do that, we still find cases where you're still slightly micromanaging, but that is wrong. You know, as managers, it's important for us to get things done through and with people, which is the most widely accepted definition of management, right? So to be able to accomplish tasks, we have to grow into that space and also grow our employees to be able to take on responsibilities and also assign authority to them, you know, empower them, right? And then guide them to think. So managers can also, as managers, we should try to, you know, transfer authority, responsibility for work, you know, and it can also give that room for growth, right? That developmental opportunity to help employees to expand their knowledge, you know, their skills by giving them stretch assignments, their capabilities, and also their decision-making skills, you know, which is a core competence in the world over, you know. And we know how delegation can help us focus on key strategic things, that can also lead to better decision making. Because when we delegate, we tend to focus more on strategic things. And while we're doing this, we should be able to allocate duties, right? As managers, the tasks, activities that need to be accomplished has to be explained, right? And it's important for us not to micromanage, not to even help our employees out in this process, but also but to train them on how to think, but to give them a pathway on how to go about achieving, results, and also the delegation of power would help to empower subordinates. So when you delegate authority, you empower a subordinate to act for you as a manager, and it's also important that when we assign responsibilities, employees are performing the job adequately. And we can also create a sense of accountability where we hold employees responsible for carrying out the task, right? And also being accountable to the manager for satisfactory performance at work. To be able to achieve this, it's good for us to first of all clarify assignments, right? So while we're trying to delegate, it's important for us to explain what is being delegated, clear cut. What results are you expecting? What are the deadlines? How do you want them to think or approach these issues? You set boundaries, give them a scope to work with, right? They understand precisely what are the parameters of this authority that you're giving them, right? In this task, this is what you're supposed to do. This is the scope of work. And these are how I want you to report to me. And then also encourage participation. It's important for you to involve delegates in the decision-making process. It gives a sense of ownership, and it makes them bring their full self to work because they're also responsible for that decision that they have put out, right? And then also the standards that need to be attained. Now, according to this book, research showed that using the Pareto principle anyways, 20% of your activities, is 80% of your results. So try to do more of 20% and delegate the 80%. It's also important for us to inform others, let everyone know who will be affected by the delegated work. This is the task that I've assigned. This person now has authority. This person will be sending this report moving forward. So there is no confusion in your team. It's also pertinent to encourage development, insist in the beginning that, the delegates need to come to you with a problem, but also prefer solutions. I can remember, when having meetings with some of my bosses and you bring a problem, they will ask you to think of a solution. Okay, from the way you've seen this problem now, what solution can you think of? What's running through your mind? How do you think you can tweak this? This would help spur curiosity. This would help spur innovation. So it's good to encourage development and also establish controls, to make sure that, the time for completion of task is set, the dates for progress, random check-ins, and how problems will be discussed. And then we'll move on to motivating others. Every day in life, people make decisions about how much effort they want to put into their work. It's important as managers to have many opportunities to influence these decisions and also to motivate our team by providing engaging, challenging work, recognizing outstanding performance, allowing participation in decision-making, like we've said earlier, and also show concern for personal issues, right? Because motivation can be intrinsic and extrinsic, and we'll delve deeper into it. So as a manager, you need to understand what drives your team to do the best. And they used a framework to further share this point, which was American psychologist Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is widely known by a lot of us in the HR field. So in the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it talks about physiological needs, safety needs, social needs, self-esteem, and self-actualization. So with this, for the physiological needs, you are basically trying to find out, What are those basic things that would make people feel safe, feel that strive for survival, satisfaction of thirst, hunger. Once you get that, you now move to a different level of need, which is the safety need. Because once the physiological needs are met, the safety needs are then aroused, where you're looking for job security, you're looking for safe working conditions, right? And once this is achieved, you now move to a different stage where you're looking for safety needs. Since I have job security, I want to feel among, I want to feel important, right? You move to the self-esteem needs and then self-actualization needs, right? So it's important for you to understand what really motivates your team. Are they intrinsic in nature? Are they things you cannot see? Or are they extrinsic in nature, like praise, promotion, pay rise, and all of that, right? So I'll move quickly to appraising performance, which is very key. And as a manager, you must ensure that the objectives are met. And also you provide team members on how to improve their performances. This can be through, formal feedback or formal performance appraisals that we have monthly, weekly, and sometimes quarterly or biannually or even yearly, And when you're assessing progress, you need to be able to give feedback in a formal setup. You focus on the goals, you monitor achievements, you do not give feedback to attack the person's personality, right? You focus on the job that relates to the person's designation, right? And you should also be able to provide positive and negative feedback, right? And also give, objective first-hand observations as evidence, to buttress your point. You also, this is something a lot of us as managers tend to avoid, which is giving constructive feedback. Nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news, but it's important for us to speak frankly, to speak assertively, which my co-discussant Lolade talked about, being able to give constructive feedback, without offending or sugarcoating, your criticism. And it's important for us to keep your appraisal, goal-oriented, make sure your feedback is specific, targeted at the job, and encourage self-evaluation, and this will move me quickly to leading others. Leading basically involves providing direction, influencing, galvanizing people, getting their commitment, in order to achieve those organizational goals. And, the first thing we'd like to look at is creating an ethical path, setting ethical boundaries. As we all know, ethics refers to basically those principles that define good or poor conduct in the workplace, right? And it's not just a fanciful idea, right? So it's important for us to have standards, values that we stick by. And as managers, it's more important for us to be able to not just tell, but show, right? We should be able to embody those ethical standards that will set, for ourselves, because in some cases you might find yourself dealing with litigation or even a bad employer brand. So it's important for managers to be able to set standards, for those they're managing, and then create a tone. It's important for you to set a tone, right? That, your employees can follow suit, because, as managers, the searchlight is now on us, and it's important for us to be held to the high standards that we preach in the organization. And, for us to be able to develop ethics, you need to know and understand the organization's policy on ethics. What is the organization saying about this? Where are those gray areas that we've tackled? And in some cases, you need to be alert. You need to also anticipate unethical conduct. Try and put yourself in a situation where someone might be tempted out of character, and try to replay what you would do in that situation. You need to consider all consequences. Look at issues from all vantage points. And ask yourself, if this is brought into the searchlight, will I be proud of the decision I've made? Would I be prepared to deal with the consequences? It's important to also seek opinions, right? It's great that we have this platform where we have seasoned HR thought leaders where you can always just, run to and, share some of these pertinent or pressing issues that you might be facing, with their experience. I'm sure they can also guide you. And lastly is to do what you believe is right, what you hold so true, what you know, what you feel is right. It's important for us to do that. And also this brings us to getting a cultural fit in the organization, right? So in an organization's culture or personality, those values distinguishes it from other organizations, right? So you can have banks everywhere, but the culture in Bank A is different from the culture in Bank B. So it's important for us to be aware of the culture, right? Because you're going to respond to those principles, and you also need to develop an understanding of it, for those people who you will be managing. The cultural imperatives of an organization are often written down or even discussed. What brings to mind was like the iceberg approach, where you just see the tip of the iceberg, you see a few things, but when you look below, they're a myriad of issues that are listed there that are not coming to the surface. And if we want to really ask ourselves the truth, it is those things that are nuanced, those things that are not so easily expressed, those things that are tacit. Those are those things that really form the culture in the organization. And it's important for successful managers to be able to create this culture in 3 ways. First of all, you need to hire and keep employees who think and feel the way you do. People who have the same ethos, who have the same mindset in the way the company approaches. It's important for you to have retention with that amount of bench strength. Secondly, you also need to indoctrinate and socialize these employees to your way of thinking. And this can happen through like an onboarding, process as you're getting into the organization. You get people to, to think and to approach things the way you would want them to approach things. And also, thirdly, you need to be the culture, if I put it that way. You need to be able to model that culture. Your personality needs to be central, to that culture of the organization. And this a survey that was carried out in this book stated that 77% of people would consider a company culture before applying for a job there. Gone are the days where people just look for compensation before they move jobs. Now, as a result of the pandemic, a lot of people are prioritizing their mental health, right? They're really looking inwardly to say that, what, I don't think this place will be worth my time. You notice that when you put out an ad for a job, you see some applicants, checking out your company profile, asking questions on previous employees, going to Glassdoor to get reviews and all of that. So it's important, to model a very good culture. And, just to end the culture section, the better the match between your personal style as a manager and the organization's culture, the more successful you are likely to be. And this takes me to problem solving. Managerial success, basically depends on making the right decisions at the right time. So decision making is a key component, in our work today. But unless you define a problem and identify its root cause, it makes it impossible to come up with a decision. You hear the saying, a problem well defined is half solved, because when you know the problem, you can then clarify the problem, you can then develop, multiple alternatives to see how you can achieve, you can get a solution, right? So the problem solving process basically involves, first of all, identifying, and if you're just careful and observing, you would know like, okay, this is where the problem is coming from. After identifying, it's important for you to define the problem, doing a careful analysis of the problem and then making a decision, right? Okay, because we've defined this problem, this decision that we're going to take. And then after taking the decision, how are you going to set your action or your plan in motion? What task are you going to do? What responsibilities are you carrying out? And then last but not the least, which always comes at the end, is you monitoring progress to ensure that, you are achieving the desired outcome. And this takes me to building power, in the organization. And power is most effective when exercised by people who have the interests and needs of others. This is very important, and learning how to wield power using social intelligence would help you build influence and develop your career. So what this place is basically saying is power is mostly effective by people who have the interest of others at heart, So if power gets to someone who is selfish, someone who is strong-headed, and someone who does not listen, in most cases, they end up taking selfish decisions that might harm, the company or its people on the long run. So it's important for power to be wielded by socially intelligent or emotionally intelligent people. And this brings me to managing change. Change is constant, whether we like it or not. Change is constant in our personal lives, in our places at work. And it's important for managers, teams, individuals, an organization to be able to adapt in a timely manner. And in this VUCA world that we are in, it's important for us to be agile. It's important for us to be a learning organization. It's important for us to be able to be flexible, to adapt to the dynamism of the world. And, the book spoke about, something that I really appreciate, which is Kurt Lewin's model, for the phases of change, which talks about unfreezing, changing, and refreezing. And it's conceptualized from like an ice block, right? An ice block would not change till it melts its shape. So basically it needs to unfreeze. This is the stage where you need to alter the resistance to the behavior that you're currently facing, right? You know how we can get comfortable with what we're doing and we don't want to accept change. But for us to be able to get that change, something has to give, something needs to melt, right? And when that takes place, they will now move to the stage of change. It's melted. It's now in a state to change to something else. This is where the actual change takes place, right? Where you have to let go of the old and, you go in with the new, and also to develop new things. And then also refreeze. This is the stage where you reinforce these changes and it becomes stabilized. Just take, for example, maybe you want to change the intranet of your organization. And a lot of people are used to, the old, and they do not want to change. These phases of change can also help. And while this is taking place, it's important for us to be able to share, what's in it for people, right? What do they stand to gain? What do they stand to benefit from this new process that's coming in place, and also to support them with power users. So let's say a new software is coming into the organization. There are a few people who would get it faster than other people. Those people can also be used as peer mentors, to help people, to encourage them, to make sure that they understand, that new software. And this takes me to helping others improve, their performance. And we're going to look at different ways. And the first one is accepting mistakes and using them as learning opportunities, right? It's important to have a learning mindset and to have an open mindset where you accept mistakes, you see opportunities and you learn from it and you improve. You actively listen to employees, show genuine interest, use a design thinking approach to be able to solve problems. I can remember there was a time we were using a clocking machine and we just went about it, got it, put it in a particular place, and the adoption was low, right? So I discussed with a colleague and we came up with an idea to use a design thinking approach. So we did a peer learning session and we just asked people, what would you prefer or what would you think would work? And it was a very insightful and collaborative, discussion. And when we factored all those things into play and we changed the position, changed the color, tweaked a few things, we saw that the adoption was high. Even till date, the adoption is still at a stable and positive rate, just to show you how by actively listening, employing design thinking, showing genuine interest in the feedback of your employees, you can improve performance. You know, you can also help develop action plans, and also most importantly, recognize and reward even, you know, small improvements, you know, celebrate small wins. That's also important, right? So I'll move swiftly to coaching and mentoring. I know we're constrained for time, so I'll be fast. You know, basically, looking at the two continuums, coaching is the process of helping someone improve performance. You know, a coach will analyze your performance, give you insights on how to improve, offer leadership, motivation, and a supportive climate to help you achieve improvement. The coach will work with you to come up with solutions. While in mentoring, is slightly top-down, where a more experienced person is collapsing his years of experience and pouring it down to you, you know, to help you sort out problems faster, you know, encourage you and provide emotional support. You know, you see, coaching and mentoring has become so important that 50%, 55% of global companies now run internal coaching programs. We even do that in our organizations, even as small as we are, where we have younger employees and we pair them to, you know, C-level executives or team leads, for them to be able to grow, for them to be mentored, and for them to really acclimatize to the organization. And there are 3 skills for successful coaching. One is finding ways to improve performance. The second one is influencing others to change their behavior. And then lastly, creating a supportive climate. And last but not the least is managing careers. You know, in today's rapidly changing business landscape, managers need to actively manage their careers, you know, provide guidance to those they are managing, determine where and how best they can contribute. And you need to know yourself, to be honest. Continually develop yourself and be able to ascertain when and how to change the work you do. You know, it's important that, you know, even as managers, as we're creating career development plans, as we're managing careers for employees, we should also chart our own career path. And it starts with self-assessment, right? Where you do an in-depth analysis of, you know, where you are headed, you know, what you need to do, what are your values, what are your strengths, what are your ethos, right? How do you, and this would inform how you now guide, you know, younger employees. And it's also important for you to ensure that, you know, the people you are managing have reasonable workload so they can be engaged, right? It's important for us to keep our team updated of goals, strategies, create growth opportunities, offer financial assistance, pay time off. But there's a caveat here, because if you're giving paid time off or your employees are working remotely, we need to ensure that they have reasonable workload. We need to ensure that they are engaged, right? And they are working, you know, and there's goal congruency between yourself and the organization. And, you know, just to end this, individuals just beginning their careers are usually more concerned with identifying organizations and have potential to satisfy their career goals. When they settle, they now look at managing their bosses, getting along with their bosses, managing their image. And at the middle level, they're looking at, you know, how do they improve their competence? How do they become more of a generalist so they can function, you know, everywhere or every sector in the organization? And lastly, in the latter stages, you know, they look at how they can, you know, give back by teaching, by mentoring, and also leaving an indelible mark, you know, before retirement. It's important for us to have career development, but I want to end this that it's important for individuals to be able to steer their careers, for them to be able to determine the trajectory of their careers. Your company will provide a framework for you, right? But you as an individual can determine how far you can go. So I know I've taken like 9 minutes of the time. Sincere apologies. I would like to end here and hand over to Ezine to just highlight on the salient points. Then we'll have questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moses. I mean, we can just call it a day here, because you just took us through a master class. Like, I hope people that are here were taking notes, because that was amazing. Thank you so much, Moses. That was really amazing. It was thorough and great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm not going to repeat what, you and Lolade said. I will talk about things, like I said, that stood out to me. I mean, I really want us to have a little bit of time for people to make comments. So please, if you need to make comments, start putting in your comments. We can address them, or questions if you can answer in the little time we have left. But let me start. So I'll go through the chapters and just bring out a few things that particularly stood out to me. So in chapter 1, when we talked about understanding yourself, right? There was one particular thing that, stood out to me, which was the point about having a good EQ. So it's really not just about having a fantastic technical competence, right? And that's the mistake a lot of people make, when you have people that are technically proficient, all of a sudden you decide that, oh, this person is next in line to be a manager. And I have seen this happen one too many times. You promote someone or you hire someone for technical competence, and the person just sucks as being a manager because that other part of the person has not been developed. So as much as you have a good IQ, it's important. As much as you have the technical competence, the IQ, it's also important to have the EQ, because when someone who has the EQ as well as the IQ will be definitely much better, or function better as a manager than the person that just has the great IQ. And I've seen this happen. Like I said, we have people that, we put them in managerial positions and they struggle, and the truth of the matter is that the fact that someone is the most technically competent person in the team does not mean that, the reward for that is to make the person a manager. The person may just be the fantastic senior type person. And then you might have someone who is not even as technically competent as that person, but the person has a high EQ level, functioning as a manager. So please, that is important for us to take note of as managers, as aspiring managers, or, even as advisors to managers. These are things that we need to take into consideration. There was also another thing that I remember was discussed in the group, and I think that is something we need to ponder upon, where we talked about the X-style manager who doesn't believe that workers need autonomy, that people should be controlled. And then the Y-style manager who believes in empowering workers. And I remember there was a little bit of a debate in the group where somebody was saying that, yeah, but then, this style, X-style works better with the blue collar people, and then the Y-style, because it's collaborative, it works more with the white collar people. I think it's something up for debate. I would say, I think I tilt more on the side of the Y-style, but maybe in some cases, some people tend to maybe take pieces of those different types of leadership, depending on the situation where you find yourself, hey, but then it's up for debate or for us to discuss. There was also another thing, as a manager, I know that Moses touched on this, but as a manager, you should have your own personal mission statements. Yeah, it's something that enables you to set goals and benchmarks for your evaluation. I'm very big on, setting goals, putting them down and tracking yourself. So it's not just enough to just be moving without direction. What are the goals that you've set for yourself as a person, as an individual? Because if you don't have goals for yourself, how can you then set goals for your team? Yeah, so have your own personal mission statement. And I think that there was a note, I made a note of this. I think it was, I can't remember who, I think it was Moses that made this statement. But there was something that was said, hold on, I'm trying to find my notes, where it said, when you need to set your own philosophy, your guiding mantra for life. And to do this, you need to have a mental picture of what you want for your future, where you're looking at, just like how Moses just said now about your career, managing your career, where do you see yourself in? So that will form what will make your personal mission statement. If you don't have an idea of where you're going, how can you have a personal mission statement? And how can you even lead people that's, a team of people if you don't know where you're going to? So how would you be able to take those people to? So and make sure that this personal mission statement is an accurate reflection of your vision, like I said, and SMART goals. Your goals must be SMART, and your aspirations. And then every small win that you achieve for that journey or that path that you're taking, reward yourself. and because that would ginger you to, keep at it. And then get support from people that that have walked that path. And that's the part where you have things like coaches and mentors come, especially mentors. When you see someone who has walked that path before, get that support from the person. And the truth of the matter is that a mentor does not have to be someone you can even have indirect mentors, people that you're just looking up to. You probably don't even have a relationship with them, but you just follow them and follow their journey and see what they do and channel yourself after them. But I found that mentors I'm very passionate about mentorship and coaching anyway, but I found that these are very helpful people in your life. I call them the squad: mentors, sponsors, and coaches. I always say this anywhere I go. A mentor is someone, I typify it to someone who has been on that path before, is able to see the potholes, right? The person knows, so how you're driving and a road so well that, you can close your eyes and say, oh, there's a pothole here, let's take this way, let's take that way. That's what a mentor does. He or she has been on that path before. The person can tell you how to go on that road and maybe take a shorter route. So you might not take as long route as that person did, but it's important that you have a support system as a manager. And even if you suffer a setback, even if you make a mistake, don't be hard on yourself. Be honest with yourself and then do a reevaluation of your goals. Because sometimes you may need to review, tweak here and there and say, okay, maybe I need to redo this. I have to tweak this and, and keep on at your journey, but just make sure that it aligns with your vision as a manager. Moving on to chapter 2. Chapter 2 was really interesting because it was about communication. I know that Lodade has talked about communication. I like the part where she said, when you communicate with someone, you have to make sure that they understand. So I heard where she said she would ask, do you understand? So it's not just enough to pass a message across. Make sure that the receiver actually gets what you're saying. And then you have to tweak your communication according to the audience that you are interacting with. Like Lolade said, I will not go and be speaking free English to certain people because I'm like, they'll just be looking at me blank, like, what are you on about? But when I come to their level and then I relate in their own language or whatever it is, that way it gets across faster. And I remember an example that Moses gave, where we talked about communication being 93% nonverbal, and it's very, very predominant in the climate in Nigeria where we find ourselves. I can say something, I can say one particular thing, and my facial cue means something else. Like Moses said, your boss tells you, you say, where do I keep this thing on the fly? I say, put it on my head. And you just take it literally, look at his face or look at her face and see exactly what they're trying to communicate. So yeah, it's not just about communicating verbally. What is your body language saying? Because sometimes the body language passes the message or is communicating much more than the words you're saying. And then also the form of communication. So I know, that when we talked, we should also recognize that because of the rapidly changing workplace that we find ourselves, there's hybrid work, there's remote work. You have people, not just the people you deal with face to face, there are people that you're dealing with virtually. So if you're sending an email, you might be passing a message, but the person on the other side is not getting the message the same way. So especially with remote people, you have to make sure that your communication is more in depth. If it means picking up the phone or whatever you need to do, even in the office, I've worked in places that people are just shooting emails, and at the point you're like, what? Hold on. You put off your email and say, walk to the person's office and say, hey, let's talk about this, and it gets more results than just sending emails. So, however, you need to figure out what communication methods work for you. If you need to amp it up, but communication is so important that affects how effective you are as a manager. You need to understand what works for you with your team. I'm trying to remember the other things that stood out. And then feedback. Please don't shy away from negative feedback. And I found that line managers tend to do this a lot. They leave it for HR. They want HR to do the grunge work. When it comes to the hard feedback, it's like, oh, I can't do this. HR, come and do this. But you can't shy away from it. You must be able to give feedback, both positive and negative. The thing is, there was a research that said, people actually crave for feedback, yeah? But even if you're going to give negative feedback, let it be done properly. I think Moses talked about this, where you're not attacking the person. I think Lolade also talks about where you're not attacking the person, but you're addressing the issue, not the person. Moses talked about this in performance feedback. Yeah, so don't shy away from feedback. It is part of being a manager. You cannot avoid it. Even conflict, conflict is normal, it's natural in an organization. Don't shy away from it. but know how to handle it. And that's where your values come in as a manager. If you're aware of your values, you can stand your ground in conflict. If you're aware of your ethics, you can stand your ground in conflicts. You won't be swayed from here to there. Everybody knows what you stand for. And then another part that we talked about or stood out to me was D&I, diversity and inclusion. Give everybody equal opportunities. Let your teams be diverse. Open up the nets for you to have that diverse team, because that diverse team brings about innovation of ideas. Everybody is not cloned after you. People are thinking differently. I've been in teams where we sit down and we're brainstorming about things, and somebody will just throw a curveball from somewhere, like, where did that come from? That's the beauty of diversity. So that is something you should encourage as a manager in your team. It minimizes groupthink. You don't want everybody thinking the same way. You want to have diverse opinions, and then also you want to connect a wider customer base, because depending on what your product you're putting out, you want to address different needs, not just one particular set of people. Then another thing, unconscious bias. You need to address unconscious bias. You need to tackle it. The truth of the matter is that probably all of us, I don't know, maybe there's a small percentage of people that don't have unconscious bias, but it's there. And if we look at unconscious bias as a topic, you'll be amazed at the kind of unconscious biases we have as human beings. You tend to assume certain things, and then you go in with that kind of mindset as a manager, managing people, it becomes a problem. So you need to tackle those, unconscious biases, because as a manager, you're going to have to be open-minded, and you need to establish a culture of, having people speak up. Now, talking about culture, that brings me to chapter 3. Was it chapter 3? We talked about culture. I know that Moses just dissected everything, so there's really not too much to bring out, but I will talk about, delegation. And I was thinking when I was reading that part, and it's so funny why people shy away from delegation. Me, I like people to do the work so that my rest will be played. I have time to think strategically, be doing I'm not saying I won't be able to do, I won't have my hands in other things, but I'm happy to empower people. I'm happy to have people empowered to do the work, such that I can go on leave. I always used to ask this question. I'll say, managers, don't you want to go on leave? Why do you want to hold all the work to yourself? You can go on leave and sleep, because you have empowered people to think, to think productively, and then you can now have your team to an extent on autopilot. So people should learn how to delegate. I mean, don't be afraid to delegate, and don't be afraid of them making mistakes, as long as those mistakes are not costly mistakes. But in making mistakes, people learn. You don't become fantastic overnight. It's from practice. And I remember somebody even made that comment in the book club. He said, these things we're talking about, you don't learn them overnight. You repeatedly apply them, and as you apply them and as you practice, you become a better manager of people, right? So don't be afraid to delegate. Make your expectations clear. When you make your expectations really clear, you will see that the people you're working with are not dummies. They will get it, as long as you communicate to them. And something that Moses said, empower them. It's not enough to say, do this. Empower them, empower them to be able to, stand, when you're not there or when you're not available to be there. And then motivation, I'm very big on that too. Reward and recognition. Reward does not have to be something all out there. Yes, according to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, depending on what people want. But sometimes all people just want is a box of donuts, that will ginger them and they're happy. I remember, in teams I've been, boss would just come and I would buy people muffins, and then everybody like, everybody's happy. Or pizza, declare pizza. Or, it depends on what their needs are. I remember I have worked in a place where it was flexible work we had, and that was enough for us to do our jobs, happily, because for the fact that we knew that, hey, from the moment we come in, we're clocking our 8 hours and we're going. So I can come in at 7 o'clock and I'm going to close at 3 o'clock, and I know I'm going to beat Lagos traffic. That's enough for me to accomplish my work quickly. So you need to understand your team, understand what motivates them, and reward them accordingly. Tweak your rewards to get the most out of your team members. Then appraising performance. I find it very alarming when I've had discussions with people and they tell you they don't have KPIs. So what are you tracking? What are you measuring if you don't even have, KPIs that you have set? So it's performance appraisal is a cycle. It's not a one-time exercise. Oh, we've done it. Okay, goodbye, close the books and that's it. No, you start from certain expectations, right? We say, I will repeat this. You have to know where you're going before you start the journey. Yeah. How can you lead your people if you don't know where you're going? So set the KPIs and then let it be a continuous conversation, which is the thing about communication. You can't just wait till the end of the year, that cycle, and come and tell someone, oh, you did well, or you're too afraid to have that discussion with that person. Meanwhile, the person doesn't know how they're doing. People are very hungry for feedback. They want to know so that they can even track and measure their own performance and see how they're doing. They look for ways to improve themselves. So, put a lot of effort and intentionality into your performance appraisal, yeah? So that you help, that way you're managing your people to be effective. You're managing them to be high performance teams. Then the part, I was looking for that part about culture because that one spoke to me. Culture, it said something about 77% of people considering a company's culture. I don't know about other people, I fall into that 77%. Even before this mental health thing became a lot of a big headline or whatever, I was always very particular about culture of a company. I'm allergic to toxic culture. Like, it's somehow I would think, in fact, before I think of money, I would think of culture. I don't want to be in a place where every day I'm going to work, I'm having palpitations. And we are really, like Moses said, we're getting to that point. In fact, we've got to that point where people are thinking about, hey, is my mental health going to be in jeopardy if I come into this place? And the truth of the matter is that we're the ones that determine the culture. We determine how the culture of the places, it's how we communicate, how the work environment is. When you step into a work environment, there are certain things you will know that will determine and tell you how the company is, how it is. So, it's very important that as a manager, because like Moses said, if your style or your behavior matches the organizational culture, the more successful you're likely to be. So of course you should keep your eyes open for that. And the case study that was given was of Starbucks, and it's so true. All the Starbucks that I've been to, you can tell that they've gone through, there's a particular way, MO, that they have, and you can tell, the way the barista addresses you, they write your name on the cup. Is something that's ingrained in them, right? And I likened it to when I was in, not the GTB of now, the GTB of years ago, when I was in training school. We went through training school. So the way I behave now, certain behaviors I have now were imbibed in me from training school in GTB, because we were not just taught the technical part of how to be bankers, they were also taught how to deal with our customers. So there was a certain way you would communicate with your customers. You would know, it's all of us that went through that particular training school. We behaved a certain way. There was etiquette, there was a way, there was no customer that was too small, there was a way you would, so it's something, so that culture thing, it's something that maybe companies need to adopt. You're here, you're a HR manager, whatever, you imbibe, there's a certain culture you want to have. You can start from the early stages, from the onboarding, to imbibe that into the people you're bringing into so that they know, when they even come, they know that if you're not able to blend in with that, then you're out. You don't suit the the organizational culture. So for some companies, that's where they start from imbibing the culture from people from the beginning, so that they're able to assimilate well into the culture. And the part about helping others improve, and we talked about counseling. In counseling, let's just know that you have to be confidential. If someone has put in their trust in you as a manager, has come to you to tell you about stuff that they're dealing with. Because I think Moses talked about it, where he said you should also be interested in people. It's not just about managing people, you'll be interested in them personally. If they trust you enough to say stuff to you, then you should reward that trust by keeping whatever it is confidential. Because I like to believe that it's not just HR people that are in this book review. We also have people that are not necessarily HR. So it's not just, if you as a manager have been given that trust and been entrusted with that information, make sure to keep it confidential. And then, we talked about coaching and mentoring. And then to round it up, yes, like Moses said, I'll reemphasize it. If you cannot be intentional about managing your own career, then how then are you going to be able to manage the careers of the people that you're leading? I remember that the most effective or the best managers I had were people that were high flyers. They were very big on their careers. They had their plans mapped out. So when, I started working with them, they're like, isn't it, what's your plan? They were the ones pushing me. And because I saw what they were doing, I was inspired. So it's not a case of do as I say. but it's do as I do. So I could see them and I was inspired. So what are you doing as a manager? You know, are you lackluster? Are you lukewarm? And then you now expect the people, you know, that you're heading to be stars, star performance. It's not going to happen now. So you take charge of your own career. Then of course you will see that, you know, the people that you lead will definitely take after you. But yeah, this was a fantastic book. I really loved it. And I look forward to our next review. But you guys, Lolade and Moses, you were amazing. I mean, I practically lifted my legs. I didn't need to do too much, you know. Thank you for making the work easy. And I look forward to another review with you guys. So I wouldn't mind doing another one with you. But yeah, it was amazing. But in the meantime, I don't know if we have any questions, anybody with questions. You know, I think we have, okay, we're fast spent for time. So maybe if we have one question or contribution, we can entertain it before we call it a night. Okay. Thank you guys for your comments. Thank you so much for your comments. Okay, I don't know that we have any questions or contributions, but yeah, we are spent for time. We've done an hour, 30 minutes. I just want to say again, thank you, Moses. Thank you, Lolade. And thank you to everyone that has been a part of this. Thank you. And I look forward to us doing a wonderful book review for the month of August. And thank you, Yemi. Thank you, Yemi, for again giving us this platform. You know, it's always a pleasure to be here. So I'll hand over to Yemi to take it from here.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I've enjoyed this session tremendously. I must say thank you to Moses Oblegba. Thank you, Ezine Obiora. And thank you, Ololade Akpalowo. On behalf of the over 80 people who joined this select session, thank you so much, Moses. Safe trip home. Ezine, sleep tight, and Ololade, regards to the family. Thank you, everyone. See you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.